My name is Keith Vidal. I work at RightScale. So 2006, 2008, we had one provider that we were working with. It was Amazon Web Services. So that was the ubiquitous term for cloud. It's come a long way since. As we got into 2009 and all the way through 2011, we started working with a number of other providers. The landscape sort of grew exponentially. So I think about this 2001 analogy, those guys kind of discovering the monolith. And basically their eyes opening to the fact that there is multiple clouds out there. There's a number of options. So I think around that time we were really starting to focus on Amazon, Cloud Stack, Eucalyptus, and Rackspace, and their early renditions of those clouds. Amazon being still the main public cloud, Rackspace starting to fast follow Cloud Stack and Eucalyptus from a private cloud perspective. And then we fast forward, and this is kind of how I feel on a day-to-day basis now. So again, I work with our partner integration team, work with all these cloud partners that have come in. We've put in place an evaluation process, an engagement process to help us understand what's a good fit for RightScale, what's a good fit for users, and who we can work with to deliver this infrastructure. So it's a blur. If I look at where we are now, these are the ones that are working and available in the dashboard. We've got a number of other ones in queue that some are very, very close, like our friend Matt here from Tata, which we're looking forward to. If I look at that from a geographic footprint standpoint, it's sort of all over the world, really, all over the map, no pun intended. Regional providers, international providers, delivering a really wide range of offerings. It's really staggering to see how much it's come in the last few years. And I think what you see now is this idea of infrastructure as a service is ubiquitous. And it's also really different. And from a pure economics perspective, as users, this is awesome. I think being in this partner integration team, we see all of these integrations come to our door. We have sort of a process in place whereby we go scope the cloud partners to see what features they offer, what their use cases they target are. From an evaluation standpoint, I think it's difficult. It's difficult to find what cloud's right for you. They all look the same to me. What we do is we evaluate these clouds in a very common context, a sort of similar set of questions that we ask of all our providers, and we really try to drill into the strengths of all the offerings that are there. I think we can help you with that for those of you who are looking for public clouds today. I am a big fan of marketing. I like real marketing. I think we strive to do that. I think if I look around, I see the same things everywhere. I see high availability, fault tolerance, robust. I don't see low availability. I don't see fault intolerance. Unrobust services, not so much. And APIs, give or take. But I kid. I mean, everybody says they have these things. They say they have fault tolerant systems. They say they have high availability. Everyone's got a deep roadmap of real or planned cloud services really aimed at a broad market. Services that feel like appliances. You take like Elastic Load Balancer, Amazon's relational database service, aimed at big use cases, big data, PCI compliance, audiences from developers to sysadmins to managers, and everybody's got an API. Not everybody exposes all their data via an API. So I hear, yeah, we can provide that info. We keep it in our database, and I think to myself, you might as well send me a CSV file and I'll open it in Excel because that's about how useful it is to me. It's all about the API, and I think everybody's seen that over the last couple of years. I think what's interesting is that I was talking to one of our cloud providers that we're evaluating right now, pretty large name, and we were talking about just some inconsistencies in the behavior of how their infrastructure is being provisioned. Inconsistencies around launch times, return times on calls, data that wasn't there that should have been there. And when I was sort of asking this person about it, I was sort of pinging him and saying, hey, when I look at you guys across all of our other partners, this is just given. This is stuff that everybody's got at this point. Where are you at on it? And what I hear from them is that they were so focused on their relational database product, and they're so focused on their load balancing product that they're not even really paying attention to their infrastructure as a service anymore. And I think what's happening is that everybody expects that that's just a given at this point. Everybody expects the infrastructure as a service to just be there, and it's not. The on-demand nature of it, the need for reliability and consistency and automation and making it work all the time is still a big, big issue. And I think that's where we're looking to see these multiple providers out there and hopefully see them deliver more. And I think, as if I go back to my 3 years ago, everybody that I was talking to was maybe using one cloud, maybe. Some haven't, and I think that people think about one cloud, that there's only one viable public cloud out there. I've heard that from a number of customers. The reality is that there's not. There's a number of other public clouds, and I want to share them with you. I don't think this is the Highlander. This is my last sci-fi reference of the day for you guys who are following at home. There could be more than one, and that's kind of the theme of today. So back to RightScale. We are really an API and a UI that sits on top of private and public clouds, which I think you guys know at this point. Our goals are to standardize the terminology, the resources that you will use across clouds, so you're not having to worry about what Amazon names a volume versus what Microsoft Azure names a volume. We look for common images that we make as vanilla as possible and that are ready to automate. We try to implement a common interface with a standard and consistent terminology throughout RightScale, the API and the UI. This API abstracts a lot of these nuances from each of these providers, from their APIs. Translations for single API calls and even multiple API calls for some clouds. Our goal is that we abstract what we don't think that you should worry about. Sometimes it's easy, like a volume. Volume's a volume of volume, no matter which cloud you're dealing with, and sometimes it's more difficult. Networking, for example, brings us a lot of challenges. But again, our goal is to try to be your translator for all these different clouds that are available. We've gotten here over 6 long years. A question that I get a lot is, how do we choose our partners? I would love to say that it was all strategic, and that's probably partly true. The reality is I think there's been a lot of opportunistic movement. We've been lucky, very lucky to have some really good leadership, a lot of great customers, amazing partners, and I think the market's been well timed. This is a good place for us all. And I think that back to choosing those partners, it's not academic. I mean, we have, if I go back to, I came from the PS group, so I've probably seen, close to 300 customers come on RightScale just through our onboarding process. And I see a lot of commonalities. I see a lot of similar applications, Web 2, enterprise, really scary looking legacy footprints, web apps, social apps, batch processing, BI, big data, enterprise CRM. We really focus on those real world use cases and try to let that inform our product development. As it stands now, I think we've got a triple-digit list of cloud providers in our pipeline. I think it's difficult to figure out who the right partner is to work with. So back to this idea of having a reusable cloud evaluation framework, this is what I wanted to share today. So the biggest thing that I've seen across any migration or onboarding engagement has always been about knowing your own application, knowing what your human resources look like internally, and knowing your organizational strengths. So 55,000 users at this point. Again, many onboarding engagements. Those are just the ones that we've touched. There's a whole slew that we haven't touched. The vast majority of delays when people deploy an application to a cloud is not the cloud, it's the application. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about that, but as you go through this evaluation process, I would be remiss to not remind you to pay a lot of attention to your application dependencies. Common blockers, stateful apps, very database intensive applications that aren't using things like caching, reliance on custom OS, custom kernels. And from a resource perspective, I've met a number of customers who make the assumption that a developer is a sysadmin, or that a sysadmin is a developer, and that's not the case. I think DevOps resources are becoming more plentiful. Automation is becoming more prevalent, but hiring talent, I think, is probably the most difficult thing that I've had to deal with in the last 3 years. I don't know about you guys, but I think the solution is to invest in education. Invest in partners that are going to educate you as part of their delivery, and standardize. There's a customer that, actually, he's not a customer yet, he's a friend. We were talking about RightScale, and they've got a nice sized cloud footprint. It's a relatively large agency, a digital agency, and he was telling me about the infrastructure they have set up. They use ops code, which is great. Chef's a wonderful tool. We use it ourselves. He told me about there's this single VP on his team that owns that infrastructure, soup to nuts. He architected it. It's his baby, and he was sort of singing the song about it. And I was like, well, what is your business? Your business is serving creative content. It's not about infrastructure. So why are you letting one person own your entire infrastructure? And I think that is what I push people to with RightScale. Not that Chef is a bad solution. There's a number of great solutions out there. What I would say is standardize at this point. Standardize your tool set, standardize your needs for infrastructure as a service. Live on the edge a little bit, but don't hang yourself out too far. But when we look at clouds, I think we really start at the foundation. I think the first thing that always comes up as I'm talking to customers is hardware. It's like, should I even care about hardware? From a public cloud perspective, which is what I'm focusing on today, the answer, as far as we go, is generally no. We don't really sweat the hardware. Anybody can buy hardware at this point. It's not really a competitive differentiator as far as we can see. What we do with the hardware obviously is important. And there's places that obviously are sensitive. You take like database IOPS, for example, or block storage IOPS. Everybody's investing in those weak points right now, I think, in terms of looking at a infrastructure that largely uses commoditized hardware. And I think, contrary to the common thought of cloud meaning commoditized hardware, we're really only seeing it in the compute layer. Everything else is very, very specialized, from the networking, storage. Increasingly, we're seeing partners invest heavily in high-speed network fabric, network interfaces, and complex storage solutions, leveraging SAN, iSCSI. From a virtualization perspective, that's another question that comes up a lot, is how important is that to me as I choose a cloud provider? I think we see 4 big ones out there today. It's Zen Server, ESXi, KVM, and Hyper-V. There's definitely considerations around each of those. I think there's some rough edges as it applies to virtualization around things like storage. I think networking, user constructs, IP addressing is a good example. One virtualization technology presents IP addresses one way. Maybe ESX provides it a different way. We abstract those so you don't have to worry about that. And what's important is that we try to take virtualization out of your decision-making process as you're looking at public cloud providers. I think the last thing, in the foundation is really thinking about what this API looks like. I mean, we're fortunate in that there's been some good market progress. We've got some great partners out there like Eucalyptus and CloudStack. CloudStack is actually behind a number of our partners' public clouds. This is great for us. We've been working with them really closely for a long time. I think we think the same way. We look at APIs and we expect machinery resources, VMs, images, instance types, volume, storage, security groups, et cetera, just to be there and look the same consistently. Everybody exposes these, but the devil of it is really, it's in the details. It's about the behavior. Back into the differentiators. I think, as I've thought about this and talked about it internally with our folks, I think when I look at all the clouds, I looked at probably 40 different questionnaires from cloud partners that we've worked with in the last couple of years and looked for what is different. The 4 things that I see: geographic availability regions and availability zones, how they implement networking, what cloud services they offer, and the human services. And those are the 4 places that I think as a user, and even as I have friends in business who are looking at public cloud for the first time, these are the places that I encourage them to emphasize. Regions and AZs, why is this important? It's really 3 words. There's failure, isolation, boundaries. I mean, that's the key as you think about geography, as you think about regions and zones. Being able to tolerate failure in a zone, in a region, even in a cloud, has become critical. Geographic availabilities can be really big for you. I don't know, depends on where your users are. The idea of being able to, Akamai is an awesome, wonderful product. We see a number of customers use it. Having a CDN with points of presence all around the world, the speed, it's phenomenal. Being able to move your whole application out to a region using the same assets, I would argue, is more powerful. And I think that's where we probably try to drive people more often than not, when it makes sense. From a networking perspective, I think something that's interesting is that you see given kinds of things like public to private communication, private to private communication, region to region increasingly being a place that you can differentiate as a cloud provider, speed, pricing. And then things to think about like how you connect back to your mothership. Do you have data in your data center that you need to leverage in your public cloud? Do you need a VPN? If you do need a VPN, does it need to be part of an integral service offering that a cloud partner provides? Or can it be something that you can spin up as, let's say, a software-based VPN? Things like log data, being able to use hybrid cloud and really enjoy the benefits of that as it applies to latency and performance, very important. being able to isolate networks, being able to talk cloud to dedicated, all very important things. And I think on the last two, cloud services, I think this is one of the most exciting places because there's just a ton of activity and innovation around this. Amazon has really led the charge, introduced a number of services as a service, take load balancing for example, platform as a service offerings, DNS, CDN, et cetera. There's a number of them out there. It's something to think about as you think about your users and as you choose your public clouds. And I think, on that note, the users part, knowing you're using it, if you've got a lot of developers without systems engineering experience, throwing infrastructure as a service at them, assuming that they can just jump into that is a really difficult assumption. I think being able to use things like PaaS as a way to migrate yourself into infrastructure as a service is a really interesting way to handle it. I think about someone like Microsoft, for example, who's got platform as a service and infrastructure as a service. The idea to be able to move seamlessly between the two is pretty exciting. I think we can finally start to see PaaS-like offerings come and be really used. So back to, you have a lot of developers, not a whole lot of system engineering experience. Think about providers with a strong set of PaaS or PaaS-like offerings. If you get a deep DevOps bench, self-service is the way to go. If you're concerned about lock-in, you got to really think hard about which cloud services you use and which you don't, because there's a number of options even if you don't use the cloud services. And I think lastly, the human services element is just the biggest piece of it. I mean, that's if I think about where I've seen cloud migrations fail, besides the app, it is the overestimation of what a resource can do. I think if I go back 3 years and I look at deals that we lost or deals that came in that were ultra competitive, it was RightScale versus managed hosting. I think for a long time the assumption was that cloud and automation equals managed hosting, and it's not. It's a very, very different thing. Self-service cloud is different from managed cloud. AWS, totally different from what Rackspace offers in terms of human services. Do you need Rackspace's human services? Maybe not. Can you deal with AWS's self-service model and realize the benefits of that? Very possible. All depends on your resources. So you really need to look in the mirror, think about what you as a team need to be successful, and figure out if it makes sense to start with something like a managed approach where you're using some managed hosting and working your way into self-service, or if you're starting the other way. So things to think about. So if I think about those 4 differentiators, I'm just going to go through the 8 providers that we're supporting today, go through some of their strengths and some of the opportunities for where they can improve, and really focus on hopefully some takeaways that you guys can use as you start to evaluate your clouds. Let me stop for a sec. Any questions so far? Is anybody looking for anything that I haven't talked about? Yeah. I think that it's one that lives in Seattle that used to still does sell some books. I think that has been sort of, because they've led the charge in so many ways, I think, truth be told, internally it's taken us some time to get beyond what we think about in terms of public cloud expectations and realize that there's more than one option. I think if you rewind a year or 2 years, we look at cloud as just cloud. I think if you look at the deals that come through, if you look at the opportunities that we have, it's more than what the cloud does. A lot of it's the human services behind it. There's a ton on the application. It's really about a whole solution. And I think that has taken us some time to realize, and I think now more than ever we're probably integrating that into our own decision-making process as we start to work with new clouds. It's a good question. So I think everybody knows the 800-pound gorilla, AWS, Zen virtualization, proprietary cloud orchestration layer, technologies that are available, generally speaking, from a virtualization standpoint to anybody who wants to start a private cloud or public cloud. 5 countries. I think you guys know where they are. US, Ireland, Singapore, Japan, and Brazil. 7 regions with 2 more availability zones. I can't stress the importance of the availability zones enough because it gives you fault tolerance within a region. You don't want to go region to region unless you have to. There are times when you do want to go to region to make sure that you have a good DR plan. But having those availability zones really gives you the benefit of that failure isolation within a single region. Networking, again, they lead the charge, public to public, private to private. I think one of the most interesting things I've seen over the last probably 2 years has been a huge move towards customers running dedicated and public cloud environments. So trying to take the best of both worlds. You know, maybe you don't want to use commoditized hardware for your database. You want to have an Oracle rack somewhere, or you want to have a MySQL database with just a ton of IOPS. I've seen customers do that with, take Equinix for example, Equinix in the data center and wiring directly up to Amazon. The latency that gets reduced as opposed to traversing the public internet is huge. There's pricing considerations there. I think lastly, from a networking perspective that's interesting is VPC. I think they've led another charge there in terms of being able to virtually isolate a network. And I think it's a trend that you'll continue to see. Their cloud services, I think most of you probably know if you know Amazon, EC2, EBS, S3, CDN, DNS, ELB, all these acronyms, RDS, PaaS, EMR. Human services, this is a huge differentiator, right? Self-service. So you get support from Amazon. And they're good at supporting their product. Their product is infrastructure as a service. Their product is not migrating data. Their product is not helping someone deploy an app. It's about understanding what the infrastructure as a service layer does and what it can't do. Their use cases, everything under the sun. It's no shortage of amazement, I think, on my side of the different types of customers that they work with and deliver on. It's the original mega cloud, as we've come to call these large clouds internally in RightScale. Definitely the market capacity leader. Full suite of PaaS-like cloud services built for self-service. It's a really important consideration. Supported by a huge partner ecosystem. Everybody who is anybody in software is trying to figure out how to work with Amazon and get in that ecosystem. Contrary to popular belief, PCI can be run in a public cloud, and I'm happy to share some stories on that if you guys have questions after. They've gone after all the certifications to take every roadblock out of the way to work with the enterprise, all these compliance and regulatory certifications. So I think definitely the cloud that folks are chasing. And I'm going alphabetical order, by the way. So we love all our cloud children equally, and I can't get dinged on prioritizing anybody first, which is why Amazon was first. So Datapipe Stratosphere. Really, when I think about Datapipe, one of the things I think about is that these guys have been in traditional hosting for years, making a good living. Very profitable company. A lot of smart people, a great orchestration layer, and using Cloud Stack, using KVM. They also do other virtualization as well, but KVM is the main one. They're in 3 countries, 4 regions, also using availability zones. Networking, one of the things that's really cool that they do is you can get a physically isolated network, which is, you can't get that everywhere. I don't know that you can get that in Amazon and some of the larger clouds without managed services or that haven't come from that traditional hosting background may not have that as an option. I hear a lot of customers say that from a requirements perspective, they also do direct connect with Equinix. They do private to private communication, public to public. They've got the typical cloud services that you see sort of as the minimum, compute, block, and object storage. They also have a CDN. And I think where they stand out again is sort of the integration services. That's the managed cloud services. And Datapipe doesn't care if you're using Datapipe's cloud or if they're using AWS's cloud. They're really all about the user and what you need. If you want AWS, they're happy to provide that. They also provide managed database services. For those of you who are still not sure if you want to put a database in the cloud, it's a fair consideration. Those guys offer Oracle and SQL Server as a service. Sorry, Oracle and SQL Server services, not as a service, manually run. Their target use cases are the same that you see typically. Hybrid hosting has become the big piece. They have dedicated infrastructure that they want to use, and anything managed private cloud, their management resources, I think, can apply to multiple clouds at this point. I think the takeaway with those guys is that they're mid-sized, up-and-coming traditional hosting provider who's making the best use of their footprint. They've got a really creative managed services portfolio, a lot of different use cases, spanning many proprietary clouds at this point, and even database services. HP. So I don't know if you guys have been following the news lately. There's been a ton. HP is in high gear on cloud. We've been working with them for about a year now. Another KVM user, OpenStack-based. So this is one of, I think this is our only public OpenStack-based cloud. OpenStack's tricky. There's a lot of volatility around what OpenStack provides. I think HP has offset that by really investing and actually contributing back to the community most of the customizations that they've worked on. So they're one of the biggest contributors to OpenStack, and I know driving a lot of activity on the trunk. Still new, one country, one region, 2 availability zones, virtually isolated private networks, public to public, private to private, and I know they have a slew of managed services that look like managed hosting, database-specific services, and others that are behind that are right behind this initial launch. So right now, their main availability is compute, object, and block storage, and they're also offering relational database as a service. I think what you'll see from them is more CDN, load balancing as a service, and all the same services that you see on Amazon. Their strengths, again, is they have the IaaS support. They also have a huge consulting and managed services organization. So I think we'll start to see them deployed on their cloud very soon. Their use cases are pretty similar. A lot of self-service developers, definitely core to the enterprise. Anywhere that you see HP software today, expect to see HP's cloud. My takeaway on them is that they're attempting to be, it's a big stroke, it's a bold stroke, but I think that this is what they expect from themselves. They have a converged cloud product that spans hardware, it spans services, networking, storage, infrastructure as a service, and human services. Access to the HP ISV ecosystem is important. If you're an HP software user, this is going to be the place that you go to start to run your cloud. And they also have a cloud services roadmap that's really aggressive. So all those AWS-like services that I mentioned before, I think they're going after. The next partner is IDC Frontier. So I think another thing that you'll see is regionally focused providers. IDC is one of the main ones that we have, another cloud stack-based cloud using ESX. Focused on a single country right now, Japan, one availability zone, Japan East, Japan West is coming soon. Awesome partners to work with, just a total treat. Offer a lot of the same cloud stack-based services that you'll see, virtually isolated networks, public-to-public communication, private-to-private. Really basic services now today, compute, block storage. Their support model is basically infrastructure as a service, so they're attempting to be very self-service. I think it's going to serve them well in the segment out in Japan for those of you who have or haven't been out there. A lot of gaming out there from a cloud perspective. I think the enterprise is starting to dip their toe in the water. Huge systems integrators out there that we work with. I was really starting to work the enterprise, seeing some really amazing things. I saw last time I was out in Japan, I saw a fair-sized Oracle footprint with a large system integrator running on Amazon in Japan, which was pretty exciting. So really aggressive, really innovative, definitely new and growing with a lot of large existing Japanese customers. So a great company, one to watch. Cool, Logicworks. Logicworks is awesome. So they're a local group. It's interesting, as we've started to offer more public cloud options, we start to see some of the larger enterprises start to take advantage of smaller boutique providers. And if I look at Logicworks, that's kind of how I think of them. I think of them as a boutique provider. They don't have the coverage that you'd expect from a mega cloud like an Amazon or an Azure or even an HP, but they do give really high-touch, white-glove service. They're local. Some people like to go look at someone in the face, not this virtual world that we live in. They're great to work with. Again, a lot of the same cloud stack-based networking features, the basic building blocks of compute and block storage. They've got a really interesting storage solution in their Isilon footprint that they have set up. And they do a lot of managed services. I think one of the things that's really interesting for them is that they specialize in media, one of the places. So NBC is a customer of theirs. They've got a very, I wouldn't call it proprietary, but a very specific way of implementing Drupal that if any of you have tried to put Drupal in the cloud, it can be done, and it's possible. There's definitely some best ways to go about it. Those guys have some amazing Drupal resources over there. It's one of the most common applications we see. So when I hear people asking about Drupal, or especially if they're media, I think about them. They've got that market kind of coordinated as far as New York City goes. They offer private availability zones, back to some of that physical isolation. High-touch services, and I think one of the things that stands out about them is that they really focus on PCI and HIPAA as far as compliance goes. So those of you who still need to process transactions, commerce, and a little concerned about it, again, these guys are great to work with. You get the benefit of public cloud plus the benefit of dedicated hardware. It's a great combination. I think one of the things that's just interesting about them too is that they're super fast follow support of any cloud stack features, which is sometimes tricky for us to keep up with them, but we like them being aggressive. And I think what I hear more often than not, as you approach some of the bigger providers, the larger the provider gets, typically the more difficult the contract and negotiation process starts to be. These guys are ultra aggressive in terms of pricing contracts and SLA. The new big behemoth. I'm super psyched about them. I have to say, like, I've worked with Microsoft in the past. I wasn't sure what to expect when we started work with them about a year or so ago. I've heard people say this internally. I haven't had all the experience, but it's maybe a new Microsoft is what I think I hear more often than not from folks internally. I've seen that. The openness and transparency and innovation that these guys have put into making Azure more than platform as a service and rolling out the infrastructure as a service product has been awesome. They've been a treat to work with. And I'm not sure I would have thought to say that about Microsoft, but we've got great partners over there. 3 continents, US, EU, APAC. They don't allow us to disclose where those data centers are. It's a sizable footprint. 2 regions and subregions. There's some pricing nuances in terms of how you communicate across region that are definitely worth checking out. It's all available on their website. The regions are connected by a large private network. One of the things that if I ask our developers what they're excited about with Amazon, besides the fact that they don't have to worry about licensing anymore, the really exciting thing is they have this global redundant storage system. So anybody know what blobs are in this room? Anybody know the term blobs? These large data objects. So as you have a volume and you snapshot it, you have this block of data after that's available. To access it in most of the other public clouds, you've got to go back through another volume to get access to it. With Microsoft, 2 things. One, this globally redundant storage, I think they were telling me that they replicate blobs 6 times. I think it's twice in a subregion, twice in a region, and then twice across the same region. I think I have that right. Twice across regions, it's 6 is the total, so there's a 2, 2, 2. I think it's, sorry. I'm sorry? I heard 2, 2, I heard 2, 2, 2, but I'm gonna need to confirm that, I think. But I wanna say it's 2 locally, that's what it is, 2 local, 2 region, sorry, 2 local, 2 sub-region, then 2 region. Is what I've heard so far. So, and again, I'll go check this out after. Besides their storage and being able to get to these blobs directly and make modifications if you need to, not have to mount a new volume, which is pretty cool. The usual suspects around cloud services, cloud content delivery networks. Definitely, we're going to see SQL database as a service coming soon. For those of you who tried to put SharePoint in the cloud, I know we're not talking about that quite yet, but that's definitely on the roadmap, and we'll see that. Same use cases that you'll see from many of the large clouds. A lot of self-service, starting with dev and test, heavy pursuit of enterprise, public, and hybrid clouds. I think one thing that's interesting about them is that, besides the fact that they're Microsoft, if you take that away, the services that they've come out of the box with, everything from the PaaS-like cloud services, this promise of PaaS I've been hearing about for years that's really difficult if you're running a PaaS infrastructure and you try to migrate that to infrastructure as a service. It's not always a clean migration. I expect that this is going to be a very clean migration path. HA, the performant blob storage, Linux and Microsoft being offered. Their huge ecosystem, SharePoint, Dynamics, many more, and Azure in a box is an offering, so you can actually run Azure in it. The Texas contingent, Rackspace, so this is the first of them. Zen virtualization, proprietary cloud orchestration layer today, next-gen OpenStack coming soon. 2 countries, 3 regions. I will say, has anybody worked with Rackspace in this room? Cheater. Have you worked with Rackspace? Good experience? I think it is safe to say that there has been some questions around their ability to provision reliably. I think with OpenStack, you're going to see a totally new Rackspace cloud. Some of the holes that I think are there today around EIPs, for example, availability zones, I think those will be eliminated by OpenStack. They're driving OpenStack development. They are the trunk of OpenStack as far as that goes. So we're heavily engaged with those guys. They've got a number of awesome support offerings that our customers tend to use a lot. I think the biggest one that we've seen from them is back to that hybrid use case, being able to run dedicated hardware, a dedicated database, and then run out to run a scalable web tier on the public cloud side. I've seen 3 of those implementations just over the last month. It's pretty awesome to watch it go down. The other thing that's really cool about that is that if you don't want to use a software load balancer, they've got access to these gigantic F5s, any one that you could want, and you can tie those via Rack Connect, which is their product that lets you move from public to private seamlessly. And they've actually made huge strides on Rack Connect to make that even easier to use too. So again, it's a $1 billion company. It's a company that we're really excited to be working with. All right, last one. I love these guys, SoftLayer. So I think they presented today. Mark was here presenting. I think far and away the most innovative and fastest to market group that we've worked with from a supported cloud side. Zen virtualization on top of a proprietary cloud orchestration layer. That proprietary cloud orchestration layer that they have gives them the most dynamic provisioning I've seen across any cloud provider. You can specify memory, storage, and beyond, both on the public cloud side, and I think they just announced yesterday that they're also offering private cloud as you go, so pay-per-go private cloud, which if you look at across the industry, I don't know of anybody that's offering that per hour like they do with the types of configuration options that are there. Per month, sorry. Thank you for that clarification. Definitely the most flexible in terms of hardware configuration options. I think the other thing that stands out about them is that they're located in 3 countries. They have 7 regions. They have ultra high speed region-to-region connectivity. So even though pricing may be a consideration as you think across regions, speed won't be, and that's different than I think most of the providers that I've mentioned today. Same use cases as Rackspace, very similar: public cloud, hybrid hosting, and managed private cloud. So more from them over the year. Again, probably the most innovative group that we've worked with, really pushing the boundaries of what we do for sure and what cloud does. So that's all I have.